All right, welcome back to There Is No America Without Erica. We all need a little bit of Erica in our lives. So anyways, we've got a really interesting Second Amendment development that came out of Washington, D.C. recently. A court there just struck down the city's ban on magazines holding more than 10 rounds. Surprise, surprise. And depending on how this plays out going forward, this ruling could end up having much bigger implications than just Washington, D.C. Because the reasoning the court used is the exact same legal framework that's currently being used to challenge magazine bans all across the country. So while this decision technically only affects DC right now, the logic behind it could end up influencing cases in multiple states and possibly even future Supreme Court rulings. Like, what is the point of this ban? It's literally so dumb. Anyways, so yeah, this one is definitely worth paying attention to. But before we get into the legal side of this, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do that is by shopping at onlytacticalfans.myshopify.com. We've got a bunch of different stuff over there, shirts, gear, survival items, and other things we're always adding to the store. And seriously, thank you to everyone who has supported the channel through the store. So far, it means the world to us. And because with the channel demonetization, that support is honestly one of the biggest reasons we are still able to keep making these videos and covering stories like this. So to everyone who has grabbed something from the store, shared the channel, or just stuck around through everything, thank you so much. And let me tell you, you guys are dedicated and loyal because it's been a process. All right, let's talk about the case. The ruling case from the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, which is basically the highest court in Washington, D.C. The case is called Benson versus United States. It started when a man named Tyree Benson was arrested with a handgun that had a 30-round magazine in it. Now, under DC law, magazines were limited to 10 rounds. Anything over that was illegal. So Benson was charged and convicted under that law. But he challenged the conviction under the Second Amendment, and the court agreed with him. In a 2-1 decision, the court ruled that magazines holding more than 10 rounds are protected under the Second Amendment. I mean, isn't all ammo like in guns? Like, I don't know. Why? Because they are in common use by law-abiding Americans. And that phrase right there is the key to the entire case, in common use. That standard comes from the Supreme Court's decision in District of Columbia versus Heller. In that ruling, the court said the Second Amendment protects arms that are commonly used by civilians for lawful purposes. And here's where things start to fall apart for magazine bans. There are hundreds of millions of standard capacity magazines in the United States. Not thousands, not millions, hundreds of millions. These magazines come standard with many of the most popular firearms in the country, like Glocks, AR-15s, SIG pistols, basically a huge portion of the guns Americans actually own. So the court looked at that and said, yeah, banning something that common probably violates the Second Amendment. But the court didn't stop there. They also applied the legal framework from the Supreme Court's decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. Under the Bruin test, the government has to prove that any gun law is consistent with the historical tradition of firearm regulation in the United States. Meaning, if politicians want to restrict something today, they need to show similar laws existed around the time the Constitution was written. And the court basically said, good luck with that, because there is no historical tradition of banning commonly owned magazines. Now, to really understand why this ruling matters, it helps to look at how we got here. Because not that long ago, the entire country had a magazine ban between like 1994 and 2004. The federal government passed what was called the assault weapons ban, and part of that law made it illegal to manufacture magazines holding more than 10 rounds for civilians' sale. That wasn't just a few states, that was the entire United States. If you wanted a standard magazine back then, it had to be made before the ban, which is why people still talk about pre-ban mags. And when that law expired in 2004, a lot of people thought that was the end of it. But then over the years, individual states started passing their own magazine bans. So yeah, this ruling striking down a magazine ban in Washington, D.C. might not sound like the biggest victory in the world. It's one jurisdiction, it's one court, but think about how far we've come. There was a time when the entire country had this law. Now we're at the point where a court striking down a magazine ban in one place almost feels like just another Tuesday in the courts, even though I feel like The ban should have never even happened in the first place, let's be real. And honestly, the fact that this doesn't feel like a gigantic once-in-a-generation win anymore says a lot about how much ground the Second Amendment movement has gained over the last 20 years. Back to the case. Because the magazine ban was unconstitutional, the court vacated Benson's conviction, meaning his conviction tied to that magazine ban got thrown out. Now, there's another interesting twist in this case that a lot of people miss. During the appeal, the U.S. Department of Justice actually conceded the magazine ban was unconstitutional. Yeah, the federal government basically said they weren't going to defend it, which is pretty unusual. Now, before anyone starts celebrating like the ATF just got dissolved, let's be clear about something. This ruling does not instantly end magazine bans across the country because this was not a federal circuit court ruling. It was D.C.'s highest local court, which means the ruling mainly applies to Washington, D.C. But it still matters because every time a court rules that magazine bans violate the Constitution, it adds more legal pressure against similar laws in other states. And right now those bans exist in places like California, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Washington, and a few others. Many of those laws are already being challenged in court. One of the biggest cases to watch is Dukan versus Bonta, which challenges California's magazine ban. That case has been bouncing around the courts for like years. And eventually the Supreme Court may have to step in and answer the question once and for all. Are magazine bans constitutional or are they not? And when that day comes, is it going to be a huge moment for the Second Amendment? But for now, what we're seeing is something else. Lower courts applying to the Bruin standard and starting to tear apart gun laws that don't have any historical bias. And magazine bans are one of the biggest targets, so this ruling out of Washington, D.C. isn't the final battle. But it is another major crack in the dam, and those cracks are starting to show up all over the country. And so yeah, let me know what you guys think below. And again, to everyone who continues to support the channel through onlytechnicalfans@myshopify.com, thank you so much. It generally helps keep everything moving and allows us to keep covering stories like this. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.